All right, time now to chat with one of our Giants writers, The Athletic, Dan Duggan. Very good to meet with you, my friend. Always good to chat with you.
Always good to be with you.
All right, I'm going to ask you a similar question to the one I asked Nate last week about Daniel Jones. What do you think is the conversation the Giants are having right now about the decisions that they have with Daniel Jones? And let's call them two decisions. A long-term deal in the $40 million a year range, or the non-exclusive franchise tag, which is the one I would assume they would give him.
Sure, yeah.
Which, if you're not afraid that a team is going to sign your quarterback for 2 first-round picks, maybe you shouldn't commit to him long-term. It's an entirely different conversation. What do you think are the arguments on both sides of that fence right now if you're the Giants?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that is like a separate conversation because, yeah, if you're not all in, are you in $40 million? Are you $38 million
So this is my question.
Yeah.
Is like, what is the goal here? What is the end game with both of these solutions and how it brings you from point A to point B hopefully being a Super Bowl contender?
Right, and I feel like we almost have to go back a year because I think, we spoke last year around this time, and it felt like, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll had a clean slate. They were going to give all these guys like 1 year, but they probably knew in the back of their minds, we're not going to be that good. We're going to start over, follow the Buffalo blueprint, get our quarterback, reset the clock. And instead they went out and won 9 games, won a playoff game, and Daniel Jones, played pretty damn well, at least in that playoff win. And changed the narrative. And, they got around him and they fell for him like every other coaching staff has fallen for him, the way he works, the way he's, in the locker room, in the huddle. He checks every box like that. But on the field, I think they saw this is a guy we can win with. But what is the price you're willing to pay a guy you can win with? It's not $45 million to use the number that's been thrown around a lot of what he's looking for. But if you're Daniel Jones, I can understand why you'd at least start there. Kyler Murray was in your draft class. He hasn't won any playoff games, and he's kind of a mess right now. He got 46 last year, so you're going to start below that? And even if maybe the end price is going to be 40, you're going to start that high because the team is going to start lower on the tag. You try and meet somewhere in the middle. That's how obviously negotiations work. But if you're the team, what is the breaking point? Because they had the tag in their back pocket. They're not going to give him $45 million a year. They're just not going to go there. But so then how good do you feel? I think that's probably the point you're getting at. If we're just going to tag him and kind of run it back for a year. Because my feeling on the tag with Daniel Jones, I get it. You don't want to blow it up. You just finally tasted some success. He's young. You still probably feel like he has room to grow. But in a year, after paying him $32 million and kind of hamstringing what you can do, because that's a huge chunk to take out of their cap.
And the tag makes you inflexible because it's $32 million against the cap for 1 year. It's
right,
not
you could
$32 million to a quarterback over a long-term deal where the cap hit in year 1 is 19.
Yeah, you can give him $45 million a year and have a way lower cap hit if you want to manipulate it as much as you can. But so my point is that, so say they tag him, how much different are they probably going to feel about Daniel Jones 12 months from now? Like, where's it going to get them to? Because I don't think his performance is going to drastically change from what you probably just saw. It's not like he had this crazy year and was that an outlier? And it's not like he's going to probably regress to being terrible. I think he's probably going to be a pretty similar player in 2023. So, okay, now next year we do the same song and dance again. I think they're in a very sticky spot, and I don't have an easy answer because I don't think
easy answer.
I don't think he's worth $45 million. But can you have such a hard line that say well, let this guy test the market? You can't do that with quarterback. I feel, and even if you've let him go and you let him what is the alternative? I hate operating for that. I think that's a terrible reason to potentially commit $150 million, $200 million to a guy. But you still, you're going to try and field a competitive team. You're going to try and have a quarterback, that you have confidence in next year. If you were to move off from, which again, I don't think they will. They'll tag him, worst case scenario, in their opinion. But even if they were going to really be bold, I don't even know what the plan B would be.
All right, so let's say it's $40 million a year, and that's the number they would eventually come to in a long-term extension. Which teams have that archetype of quarterback that are successful? Really successful.
No, and that's the problem. Because, I'm around Giants fans on social media all the time. They laugh at the fact that Dak got $40 million. Look how it's hamstrung them. And
Dak is better than Daniel Jones.
You're right. I would hope most Giants fans could soberly analyze that.
You'd be wrong about that. And most of them probably aren't sober, but I don't think they would be able to do that.
But yeah, so that's funny because you look at these other quarterbacks like the Kirk Cousins and the Jared Goffs, and all these guys. Ryan Tannehill is a favorable comparison, but where has that gotten Tennessee?
They built a machine around Ryan Tannehill.
And it still wasn't enough. So, yes. And it's tough because I think I was you on your podcast saying it's probably the pendulum swung too far. It's it can't be you have to Patrick Mahomes or tear it down. There's nothing wrong with having a serviceable quarter. But
what are you doing with that?
Right.
What is it in service of?
Right.
Okay. So if you're the Giants this year, or even over the next 3 years, building around that $40 million a year quarterback, if it's a 3-year commitment, is really hard to do, especially when you're in this stage of your team building process. You don't have a ton of young offensive stars. You really haven't allocated that sort of draft capital to pass catchers, that kind of stuff. It just feels like kind of a weight around your ankle. So if you don't choose to do that and you choose to give him the tag for 1 year, what is that in service of? What does 1 year of Daniel Jones being your quarterback do for you as the Giants? The argument on my end as to why you would potentially do that is you can't go backwards. So if you can't really concede that we're going to spend nothing on quarterback or Tyrod Taylor is going to start, whatever, that feels difficult after you win 9 games and a playoff game.
Right.
If you give him the tag for 1 year, you're competitive for another year. You send a message to the locker room that we are trying to win actively right now. You still maintain flexibility into 2024 and beyond if you want to go draft a quarterback. Trying to find that balance of we're not blowing this thing up, but we don't want to have that anvil tied around us as we're trying to build the rest of the team. That seems to be the balancing act that they're having to pull off right now.
No, for sure. That's why I was actually talking to an executive from another team. He's like, they kind of screwed themselves by exceeding expectations because, again, I think they came in with a pretty clear vision of how this was going to go. And Brian Daboll's just such a darn good coach, and they won enough games that they weren't in position to get one of these quarterbacks in the top 5, top 10. It's a good problem to have, but it still is sort of a problem. They have to weed their way through it. And I think the tag is probably where this is headed, at least temporarily, because obviously the tag deadline is March 7th. You still have another week there before free agency starts where it really limits what you can do. And that's probably where, if I'm Daniel Jones, that's my leverage. Listen, I mean, you have $32 million locked up in me. Let's meet what my demands are closer to them, and that way you have a lot more freedom to, helps me, helps the team. But if it's a really hard line thing where it's going to be the tag, Saquon Barkley probably walks. What does this offense look like without him? And you bring Daniel Jones back. So the tag to me is not a great outcome from either side. I think it offers more leverage to Daniel Jones, but I don't think either side should be that's not a viable alternative to getting something long term. Even if you're the Giants, a long term commitment, it's a little scarier. But I think in the short term it's kind of better because you have flexibility, like you said, this year, because you can lower that cap hit. You're probably gonna have him for let's say at least 2 years. I don't think that's the worst case scenario to have Daniel Jones for 2 years and, like you said, maybe give yourself an out to draft a guy if he just nosedives.
That makes sense to me, where it's okay, we know that if we drafted a guy next year, maybe we'd want him to sit a little bit and we'd have him kind of keeping the seat warm. If you can make sure that you're committed to this for 2 years while also knowing that you need another plan, then I can sort of get on board with that. But isn't it so difficult to commit $40 million a year to a quarterback that isn't the guy you want in the long game? That's really hard for me to justify.
No, it is. It's why so he's worth $35 million a year, but not $40 million a year. It's listen, that's big money to us, but in their world, it really isn't. But it feels like that's kind of where this could head to the tag, where it's we're not going to go that high on you. But then, so what message are you sending?
But that's the question. The message is what I'm worried about, what I'm curious about. What is the downside if he walks? What is the worst case scenario in your opinion? If they're just you know what, we just can't do it. We can't justify it. We'll play with. I'm trying to think of I was trying to figure out who the stopgap veteran could be, and there's really no connecting points because Dable was just in Buffalo where Matt Barkley and Case Keenum and stuff are the backups. So there's no one guy. It's he has this connection, 1 year, $8 million. That's what they do. But let's just say that they sign that type of quarterback for a year. Right. What is the worst case scenario for you?
Yeah, when they have Tyrod, which I think he was brought in as the guy he's been the last couple years where you start 5 games, not a 17 games, or start 5 games, then you hand the reins over to the rookie. No, I don't think they would have to have just the gumption to accept that we're probably going to take a step back. And I just think that's a hard sell. And it shouldn't be. They should build up some equity.
Is it a hard sell to the players? Is it a hard sell to the
ownership,
city?
Fan base, all
makes
that?
Sense, yeah.
And listen, that's obviously those guys sign your checks.
That stuff is real. It's very real.
As much self-confidence or, whatever you want to say Joe Shane could have, he still doesn't walk into his boss's office and say, listen, boss, I know you love this quarterback. I know he just had this great playoff game. I know we won these games this year, but we're going to let him go and just kind of cobble it together this year. That's a tough conversation. Yeah, because again, they do like him. It's not even a situation where there's some problems, some red flags with him. They know what they'll get from him. It's just the question is what they'll get from him worth what he's commanding, what the market really demands he gets paid. But yeah, I mean, I think if you were to say let's just blow it up and step back, that would be in a computer simulation, probably the absolute right way to go. But with the variables and the human dynamics, it would be dicey. It'd be hard to pull off, and you would lose a lot of equity built up because if they go 3-14 next year, I don't think as that season's progressing, everyone's like, hey, don't worry, we're going to get a quarterback in the next draft. I think it'd be this is terrible. How did we go from playoffs to this? I think you have to factor all in whether that's the right or wrong way to operate.